Hi, I'm Autumn.
And I'm Laura.
And together, we're the Booze Sisters. So I guess where we should start today is you might have just left off at our first mini episode, which we talk a little bit about the history of Penhurst. Laura delves right into that. And then we talk about our time at Penhurst Paracon, which was so fun. So if you haven't listened to that, you can go back. It is in the same weekend that we are now going to be journeying to the Temperance House, also in Pennsylvania. It's about 50 minutes from where we are now. So we're pretty excited. And before we go there, I was going to give Laura a little bit of history and insight into the hauntings.
Because we're going to stay at a haunted hotel.
I know, I'm really excited about it.
I am completely in the dark, so I'm just where you are.
And I didn't tell listeners in our last episode, but while we were at Penhurst Paracon, my souvenir for myself was ghost hunting equipment. And the thing I bought was a music box. And we were going to be using it at the Temperance House for the first time.
And for
I'm
those
a
of
little
you
creeped out.
For those of you thinking, a music box? Well, if you've watched any haunted, like paranormal investigative teams, you might have seen them use motion detecting devices. And a music box, when she says that, is just another motion detecting device. So when something crosses in front of it, crosses its path, a shadow or something disturbs it, it will go off and it will play the music on the music box, and it will only play as long as whatever it is in front of the motion detector. So if something were to stand in front of it, it will play for a long time. And if something were to stand for just a little bit or cross it really quickly, it'll just be a little blurb of music, like a couple notes.
So that will be interesting. We have never used that piece of equipment. It might freak me out. I might forget we're using it and then be like, where's that music coming from?
And she decided on You Are My Sunshine.
Yes, that's the music box I got. You Are My Sunshine. It could have been creepier, but it could have also been less creepy. It's going to be fun.
It will be fun. Let's hear that history.
Dearest gentle listener.
Oh, we're Bridgerton now.
Imagine strolling down the charming streets of Newtown, Pennsylvania, where history whispers from every corner. At 5 South State Street stands the Temperance House, a living testament to America's rich past, its exterior narrating tales from centuries gone by. It was constructed around 1772 by Andrew and Nancy McMinn. This inn began as a dual-purpose building. It was a tavern and a schoolhouse. What? I mean, let's think about that for a minute and how that functioned. We'll put that aside for a minute. But in 1772, when it was built, that was just 4 years before George Washington hosted a strategy session with his officers in the home's dining room to plan his famous Christmas crossing of the Delaware. Isn't that cool?
That is pretty cool.
Like, that's where he planned basically the turning point of the revolution when he crossed the river in the Christmas fog. That's crazy to me.
Can you give some background of that?
We were losing. The colonists were losing, and George Washington had since fought many, many battles. And his men were cold and hungry and didn't have a lot of supplies. Congress hadn't given them funding for a long time at this point to, like, get new ammunition, get food, get soldiers. And across the Delaware River is the encampment of the British. They were going to get up super, super early before the sun came up. And in the night, they were going to cross the Delaware River and hope to surprise the British, who would hopefully be sleeping, and they were going to be on the offensive for once. And with the weak men that he had, the cold, hungry guys that were left, they were going to cross in all these boats. They did. And it was actually by miracle that it just so happened that on Christmas, when they did this, there was fog on the river. Historians say that if that fog hadn't come down, it would have been much different, because the fog is what basically shielded them until they were upon the British. Yeah.
Autumn's the history buff.
Right, exactly. Over the years, it involved embracing various roles and names, including the Niagara Temperance House, inspired by a sign that was painted by Edward Hicks, depicting a moose beside Niagara Falls. That's interesting. We're going to get into Edward Hicks in a minute. The facade is a harmonious blend of colonial and Victorian architecture. The original stone structure, with its weathered yet sturdy appearance, exudes 18th century charm. Adjacent to it, the 19th century additions showcase Victorian elegance, featuring ornate woodwork and expansive windows that hint at the building's layered history. One of the most captivating features, and I really love this part, is that there is a visible section of the original stone wall that's nestled between the 1700s tavern and the 1800s bar area that is there now. So there's like an original stone between those two things. And there is horsehair that was used as the binder for the plaster in the bricks that protrudes out of the wall. So you can see the horsehair in the mortar.
That's
Isn't that
so weird.
Cool? So we're going to have to try to find
the
that.
horsehair. Find the horsehair in the wall.
Maybe there'll be a horse ghost.
Like a lion ghost?
Yeah, like a lion ghost.
All right, guys, we'll let you know if we find the horsehair. We might have to ask somebody who works there. Do you know where the horsehair is?
The owner, she's really done an amazing job of preserving the history that's in the house. She's really been a protector of the spirits who are there. She's really been an advocate for them. So I'm personally hoping that we have a chance to talk to her about her own personal stories when we go. Claims from guests and staff include that a heavy door to room number 9 slams shut when no one's around. In the bridal suite, newlyweds have reported unseen children giggling. On the 3rd floor, boarders wondered about footsteps of someone running across the roof. However, of course, there was no one up there. In another room, a couple heard the sound of a music box. They opened a window to see if it was coming from outside. They went downstairs to ask where the music box was. "We don't have a music box," the front desk said, and there was no other guests staying in the rooms that night. So the music box could be essential. Yeah, it could be a trigger. Some say that the most prominent spirit that resides in the house is that of American folk painter Edward Hicks. So Edward Hicks actually painted a mural that to this day remains in the dining room of the home. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his life, since he is one of the prominent spirits there. We're also going to be staying in the Edward Hicks suite when we go.
And isn't that also room number 9 that you just mentioned?
It is. Yeah. So there are some things that happen in there, but I thought going into the Edward Hicks history a little bit was extra fun, because not only is he one of the main spirits that they assume is there, we're also staying in the room that's named after him. So
I'm a fan of artist ghosts.
Yeah, and he's pretty cool. He has a cool life. Hicks was born during the Revolution and was from a loyalist family who lost everything once the war was over. At a young age, he started as an apprentice as an artist. In his memoirs, he says of this artist time of his life that, "In my own estimation, a weak, wayward young man, exceedingly fond of singing, dancing, vain amusements, and the company of young people, and too often profanely swearing." So that's how he's describing himself in this time of his life.
He's either really self-aware or he's trying to make more of a legendary character out of himself.
He sounds pretty cool as like an artist. He goes on to say that he soon grew tired of this lifestyle and he soon started to attend Quaker meetings. A year later, he married a Quaker woman, and soon the congregation he was a part of actually made him their minister.
Whoa.
So he became, from this artist lifestyle that he explains, to a Quaker
that
minister.
was swearing too much.
Yeah, exactly. He travels around Pennsylvania as a minister, and to help pay for his travels and his now growing family, he starts to paint household objects for people, farm equipment, and tavern signs and murals in people's homes to try to make a living. So it's very lucrative, and unfortunately, the other Quakers, it came to the attention of them that this is what he's doing on the side of being a minister, which completely contradicts the plain customs of being a Quaker. So he's kind of forced to try to give up his artist hobby and income to continue being a minister. But he soon realizes that he's unable to support his family, which he now has 5 children. Eventually, he decides he's going to give up his life as a Quaker. And he's transitioning to a life of painting instead. So he bounced back.
What a fun guy.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, according to the inn's current ownership, he took his life inside an interior room at the Temperance Inn in 1849. However, I could not find any documentation of how or where he died. I'm not saying that that's not true, because there's no documentation of how he died or when. But if we get a chance to talk to her, it's possible we could
To Kathy?
ask her, like where that information came from, because that's interesting information. He did visit there often, so it's very possible. Who knows?
And you said 1849? Did I get
Yeah.
that right? 1849. So how long after he left the Quaker lifestyle was that? Like, was he an older man? Was he still younger? Where was he in his life?
Great question. It was about 1814 when he fell into kind of financial ruin and decided to leave being a minister in the Quaker lifestyle and take up a life of painting.
So it was
Full
like
time.
30 years later, like a good 30 some odd years later. His kids would have been grown,
Yeah.
not with him anymore.
Yeah,
kind of,
and he wouldn't have been in financial, it would have been the financial thing, because he went back to painting and he was very lucrative. Ironically, he got all of his money basically from painting the farm equipment and people's walls in their houses and the signs and stuff. And the paintings that he did that were hanging paintings, he did for family and friends. He didn't sell those paintings to make money. He did have an exhibit, and I forgot what year it was. He tried to do a museum exhibit of his works, and it was actually highly criticized because, quote, the composition was all the same. And if you look at the paintings he does, he has a very similar style in all the paintings, where all the subjects of his paintings are heavily on the right side of the painting, and the negative space is on the left side. Like, I can see how people could say
just
the composition.
Flip a couple of those bad boys upside down. No one will know.
Also, he's a great artist, and he has a very great style. He painted a lot of animals. One of his greatest paintings he did in 1820, so after he left the Quakers. It's called Peaceable Kingdom, and it's this picture, I'll show you right now since we're in the same room, of
instant gratification.
All of these animals, and then the people are like in the background, not as important. Right. We'll post a couple of these on our episode page so you can see his works. So back into some hauntings. Edward Hicks has that dining room mural. One of the biggest things that was found on camera by an investigation team was a floating apparition of sorts in the dining room by the chandelier. That's interesting to me since it's one of the crown jewel rooms of this inn and that his mural is in there. So it would be fun if we could to do like an EVP session or something in there. On other occasion, more recently, a couple enjoying dinner saw a young woman dressed in a long white gown passing in a corridor followed by 2 cats. No one else saw anything. However, sometime later, Kathy, the owner, was in the basement repairing cement around foundation blocks when a cat's claw emerged from the mortar.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like there's cats buried down there or something. It's not weird. So both the owner and the tavern bartender attest a water faucet in a restroom routinely comes on when no one is around. They also recall a canister filled with croutons on a shelf suddenly tipping over, spilling contents over a difficult customer they were having. Mysteriously, the canister landed upright on the floor. The owner has since come to believe that the ghosts in the establishment are defending her and the house itself.
That's a cool thought. I like that.
Yeah. Guests often share stories of playful spirits. There's said to be 2 little girls and a little boy who are said to still linger on the 2nd floor. It is said that they like to play with and move trinkets and toys. The porter room is the most active, and guests have been repeatedly woken up to find a small boy standing by the bedside.
That's the one you didn't want to stay in.
No, thank you, is what I should have said. That kid should be in bed.
What is that song?
It's AJR. Come on. Okay, listeners, her and I are going to have a little MTV music time after this. Anyway, yeah, no thank you. We are not staying in a room where a little boy is going to be
As I
appearing by
said
my bedside.
before, when you mentioned this, like, they can wander. It's not like they're
Right.
just in that room, maybe.
Well, also that room has a tiny little bed.
We're
Anyway.
not sleeping. We're investigating.
Right. So, as I said, a local paranormal team spent a day at the house, climbing the ancient and narrow staircases and passing through many doors and rooms. They toured the tavern, the dining room, the ballroom, and several of the 13 guest rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors. They have a video on YouTube, which I will link to our show notes on the website. But the video highlights some of their greatest finds, which include disembodied voices, repeated whistling and knocking, orbs, significant camera movement, and a shadow figure that appeared to be sitting in a chair and then moves out of the room. In the final clip, as I said previously, a disembodied voice says, "Look up," on their digital voice recorder. And after reviewing the footage, the team caught what appears to be the visage of a man floating up through the ceiling.
That one's a little creepy.
Yeah.
Look up.
And then
You know, I
there's
think
someone there.
if any disembodied voice says look up, I don't know that I automatically would look up.
you like shield your eyes.
I'd be like, give me a minute.
look down, look down. The video was recorded in 2015, and it's not, the highest standard of recordings, but you can definitely tell that they did their due diligence of duplication and making sure that, what they're putting out there seems legit. So you can go take a look at that. That is what I have on the Temperance House for us. That's
I'm
what's
excited.
on the menu.
No sleeping. Party all night with,
Oh, gosh.
what was his name again? Hicks.
Edward
Hicks.
Edward Hicks. It's going to be great.
We should bring him a present. Some art supplies. We should
Yeah,
do
I
art.
wanna talk to
We
him.
should do art.
I didn't bring my coloring books
Oh,
with me.
well. We could talk about painting.
That's too
At
bad.
the very least.
Okay, Laura, so what, right now before we're there, is your boo rating?
My boo scale rating currently is a 2. I almost give it a 1, but I'm going to give it a 2. I do really like the history. I like the idea of this artist ghost, and I am excited to try to communicate with him.
I think it's going to be fun. I would probably give it a 2 right now, too. I don't think anything is scary. I mean, little ghosts
The little children
are
is a little scary. Yeah.
All the research I saw and read, it just seems like they're playful, like real
But if your music
kids.
box goes off, you're going to freak out and not want to stay in
No,
there.
I'm going to keep strong. I might not sleep, but I'm going to try to be a big girl about it.
Yep.
We will catch you soon. For you, it will be 1 second later because we're going to put it on the back end of this episode. But for us, it will be tomorrow night. And then we will tell you what happens.
You'll get the full report if anything spooky and paranormal occurs. Cut to us 2 days later. We have now gone and stayed at the Temperance House, and we are here to talk about it. Talk about our experiences and what we did there, and if we think it's haunted, and what our new boo scale rating is.
Because we are still alive. First of all, the age of the house
Is old.
is so evident because when Laura and I had to check in, starting from the very check-in, it's on this old street where all the buildings are pushed together and then there's storefronts and shops all right there. So you have to go around to the back to park. And there's like 5 parking spaces for the 5 rooms in the house. And we could not figure out how to get in to the building. So we called, and the host for the night, Nick, shout out to Nick. He was great. He was so friendly.
Thanks, Nick. You did an awesome job.
He comes out to find us in the parking lot, leads us through the house, but you kind of have to go through
The edge of the kitchen.
And then go through a banquet hall that's like closed except for weddings or something.
Like an old dining area. Yeah.
And then we were led like through the tavern and then to the front desk to check in. But it's like these maze of hallways that you can tell, okay, there was a building and then there was more building and then they built more building. How old structures are built. Like they just keep adding on instead of restructuring them.
And also the Temperance House and Tavern are buildings that were connected. And at one point in time, the Inn and Tavern was its own building. And the other building was a meat shop. To make this less confusing, the building has been a number of things. And in fact, it was once 2 buildings. And together now, they make up this new inn and tavern that stands today. So we stayed in the oldest part of the inn and one of the oldest rooms that existed at the time.
Right, the Edward Hicks room. It's just amazing being there because you go up and there's the staircases are, I'm sure you've all experienced older staircases, but they're steeper and skinnier. Like, people must have had half our size of feet.
They are way skinnier. I am a big girl. I'm a little plus size girl. And my hips could almost touch wall to wall going up the stairway. My shoulders definitely were kind of like bouncing off the walls back and forth like I was some kind of pinball.
But not even that. The steps themselves were thinner. Like, my whole foot couldn't step on a step. I had to step like sideways or something down the stairs.
And we were carrying our luggage, which is almost wider than the hallway. The new kinds of luggage.
Girls.
Yeah.
We're girls. We have stuff. We were gone for the whole weekend. We're like struggling up the stairs with those big
to be fair, Nick helped you with yours.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Old building. Beautiful, beautiful building. We got there a little bit later in the day. So we ended up eating there at the tavern. Nick was also the bartender and server. He pretty much was everybody that day.
But we got to talk to him, and we asked him several questions that we wanted to verify from the history. I think the first question was about if Edward Hicks really did die on property. And he was very adamant that Edward Hicks did die on property and told us that he committed suicide from a 3rd-story balcony of the inn.
Nick did say it was in the inn's records. Take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
We also got to see after dinner. We'll go back to what we talked about, but we did go into the old dining room where George Washington laid his plans, and that has the mural by Edward Hicks. And the mural was beautiful. Yes, the creatures were a little devilish and scary looking. We talked about how it was amazing that the mural even exists today and how well it's preserved, how colorful it still is, how it doesn't seem like it's even aged in time, really.
It looks like fresh wallpaper. They've done a great job of preserving it. That same room where George Washington made his plans to cross the Delaware, his portrait is in that room. And they still have the original fireplace and the original fireplace beam. It's one of those inset fireplaces where they cooked in the fireplace. And it's just, that was like one of the coolest parts actually for me to see. Just, you could tell that was really original and they've kept it.
You could literally reach out and touch this wooden beam that was the mantle of the fireplace and think about who also could have touched it in history.
George Washington probably
leaned against it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Because all men in history have leaned against a mantle.
You just see those portraits like, oh, hi, I'm a man. I'm leaning against this mantle.
Right. Exactly. I think that checks out.
But when we also asked Nick during dinner if he himself, how long he's been working there, if he's experienced anything odd. And he did tell us a few stories.
He said that his more recent experience was that he was closing down the bar one night at around like 2 or 3 in the morning because the bar stays open really late. And he thought he heard what sounded like flute music.
Yeah, flute music coming from the other room in the tavern.
He had orchestral players who were staying the night, and he thought maybe one of them was playing a trick on him or just playing really late at night and practicing downstairs. So he went to the next room to check it out. When he got there, the music sounded like it was coming from the next room over. And when he got to that room, it sounded like it was coming from the room that he started in, which was the tavern and kind of bar area. And at that point, he realized this isn't somebody playing a trick on him unless it's maybe a ghost. Because no human could have gone from the first room to the second and he would have seen them go back the other direction because there's only like one walkway through this maze of rooms.
Only one way that you could get there, possibly, and it was the way he just came.
Unless you ran up the stairs in one building, across the hallway, through the rooms, and down the stairway into the other building really, really quickly.
That would be an epic trick. I got lost. I was like, what? Didn't we come down these stairs? And you're like, no, it was the other stairs.
Right.
And then he said a few weeks or months prior to that, he was cleaning the bar again late at night, and he was washing the last of the bar glasses, and he was setting them on the drying rack. And the drying rack, as you may know, when you set a glass on the drying rack, it tips the glass 45-degree angle. And he said one of the glasses tipped and fell over, but in the opposite way that it was already tipping. So basically, instead of just going down to the ground, the rest 45-degree angle, it went all the way back the 130 to go back the other way. I probably just made that more complicated.
In this circumstance, it tipped toward the lip and not in the path of least resistance.
Right.
But against gravity and science.
But against gravity and science. So Nick was there. He was there with one customer who was just finishing his drink. And the customer said, it must be a ghost. And Nick said, no. It was just a weird coincidence. If it was a ghost, all 4 glasses that are currently drying would have tipped that way. And right when he said that, the remaining glasses tipped the opposite way and all fell over. And he says the patron that was in there took the last swallow of his beer, slammed the drink down, and walked out without saying anything. So that was a great story. By the way, the food there was delicious. We didn't even talk about it. I don't know what you had, but I thought my food was great.
You do know what I had.
I can't remember right now.
You were drinking.
Listen, no, I was drinking. I ordered like 3 things, and I was so focused on all my food that was in front of me. Oh, right. I had some of your food too.
Oh, dear. But I loved the cheese fries.
Oh, my gosh, the cheese fries.
The smothered delicious
had like
cheese fries.
5 plates of cheese fries. This is now turning into a food podcast. So anyway, then it was time to start the investigation.
Dun, dun, dun. So we took an extra drink upstairs for courage.
For courage.
And sat down with our equipment spread out over this giant ottoman footstool.
We had a large, like, suite room. We had this living room type area with some sofas and chairs and ottoman. And then we had, like, the bedroom area with a king bed. So we had plenty of space to spread out to try to communicate and set different equipment in different parts of this room.
We had 2 cat balls. We set one on the bed in case somebody sat down or laid down or something like that. We set another one on a dresser. And then we set the music box that Autumn had gotten from Pennhurst at the Paracon.
I'm so excited about that music box.
We set that on the floor, pointed away from both of us. We sat on the couches initially and turned off all the lights. We had our recording device going and just introduced ourselves, talked, asked questions. We're watching to see if anything went off and just observing. And we did that for probably an hour and a half. In that time period, we tried also, and right after that time period, moving the cat balls to different locations. We moved one to the floor, which was very rickety and a lot of uneven floorboards.
Oh my gosh, the floor, guys, was original to the inn. The history that floor has seen is amazing. Case side note. Go on.
So we did try different locations for the cat balls, and we also tried moving the music box a couple times just to change it up. We never really received any communication or any response on the music box. The cat balls did go off a couple times, not in direct response to a question, however. They actually went off almost in correlation with every time we said, okay, nothing's really happening. Let's turn the lights back on and try something else and try moving a couple things. If there was a spirit trying to communicate, maybe they just wanted the lights on and wanted us to stop. And they were really excited that we were going to change
and
things.
The EMF detector was also flat pretty much the whole night. And the only spikes that ever happened, again, were when we said, okay, well, the EMF's not doing anything, or there's no activity, let's pick it up. Then the EMF would spike. But the cat balls going off by themselves, especially the one time when we were both perfectly still sitting and not walking around, the one on the floor was going off, was pretty cool. I don't know how to explain it. We tried debunking it by shifting in our seats a lot and trying to get the floorboards to move, but it
and
didn't
also
work.
at different points getting up and walking around just to see what or where floorboards could trigger it. The one on the bed also went off by itself at one point. When Autumn was standing next to the bed, we had her try to move around on the floorboards to see if the bed shifted, and we couldn't figure out how that one went off either. But because it wasn't in response to, direct response anyway, to questions or things we were asking, we really couldn't pinpoint how to further get it to happen other than we kept trying to ask different questions about the entities that could be there. Like if it was somebody who went to school there, if it was Edward Hicks, if it was somebody during the time of George Washington. We tried all these different avenues and it just did not seem to correlate with anything specifically.
Then we attempted to do a spirit box for a time, and we also then used the Estes Method with the spirit box as well. And that's when we could have been possibly communicating with potentially a couple of people, but the results are inconclusive because it did seem like there was maybe multiple entities that were trying to talk to us at once. But
during Autumn's first session, when she went under and I was asking questions, there were 2 different periods of about probably 5 minutes each. 4 or 5 minutes each. The first one, I felt like I was talking to a spirit maybe that was from the George Washington era, and perhaps even one of his soldiers, one of his like captains or something like that. Generals. Because it would say things like, we were fighting for the homestead, and when I asked, oh, were you with George Washington? there was a response, I helped him do that. And I said, did you help him cross the Delaware or plan it? And it said something about visibility. And I said, oh, did you know that it was going to be foggy or misty that day? And they responded with, we knew.
It was planned.
It was planned. Those responses seemed very specific to the questions being asked.
It was also very colloquial time period responses, like verbiage.
Like homestead. Nobody says homestead anymore.
Right.
And visibility, like elevated verbiage is what I would say. Mm-hmm. Then there was a shift in the middle where there were a lot of random responses. And then there was a 4 or 5 minute period where it seemed like something or somebody completely different. And they said something about school, which made me think, oh, did you go to school here? And they said, it's different now. And I said, yes, the buildings are very different. They've been updated. They've been changed. This is what it is now. Are you okay with that? And there wasn't really a response. And I said, what was your favorite part about school? And the response was the girls. And which was funny. I mean, that could definitely be a true statement from a little boy or even an older boy in school. And I also asked questions that this 5 minute period had no answer to, where I kept getting, I don't know. Like I asked, what age are you? I don't know. The name that came through was Michael, and that was the only name
that we got all night
on using the spirit box or otherwise. It was the only name that ever came up. So I tried to use that after using the spirit box, we tried to use the cat balls and the music box and those things again later on.
It was actually really cool. I think that's the first time we've investigated with that equipment. And I think it was really interesting being the person on the headphones, at least for me, because when you're on the headphones and you're listening to it and just spouting out whatever it is you hear through the fuzziness, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You're just like, here's this word, here's this word, here's this word, and it really doesn't make any sense. But it was cool to come out of it and hear what you were actually saying or communicating. So that was really cool.
And then to be told, to be reiterated what words you were saying, and then you thinking, oh yeah, I remember saying that word, and it did not make any sense to me at the time.
Right.
Like when I came out and Autumn said, I think I was talking to somebody who was talking to their cat.
Right. Yeah, that was cool. I think we might have connected to someone else because I was asking questions and they were very kind of complacent or didn't want anything to do with us or me. I would ask a question and it said, I'm not talking to you. And then I said, oh, okay, who are you talking to? And he said, my cat, which, side note, is interesting because earlier that night is when we had the cat balls go off and Laura felt a cold pocket underneath her legs, which is interesting.
And we didn't even think about it potentially being a cat or a cat spirit until after this Estes method. Because initially you think cold pocket under your legs. Okay, I'm just like making things up in my head. There's a draft or something weird. Because that doesn't make sense. Why would a ghost go under your legs? But yeah, a cat makes total sense that a cat would come up to you and rub against you. Also, the only time the EMF detector really went off when I did a baseline around the room was on the chair that I was sitting on in the living area. Mm-hmm. As if something was on the chair right at the cushion level. But when I would go up the back of the chair, there was nothing. There was nothing anywhere around the chair except for on the cushion.
Right. So the spirit said, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm not talking to you. And I said, okay, who are you talking to? And it said, my cat. And I said, oh, okay, I think there was a cat maybe in here earlier. Then Laura kept saying things like, get down, get off of there. And I was like, he is legit talking to his cat. Like, I don't think it's supposed to be on the furniture. And it was like, sit there. And I was like, okay, well, usually you can't tell a cat to sit, but that's interesting. But it was not like talking to me at all. But I feel like maybe it was talking, but not to me. It just didn't want to talk to me, but I could still hear what was going on. I don't know. It was a strange
So can
experience.
the Estes method be used for residual haunting?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that could have been an intelligent or residual, honestly. Like if he's saying, I'm not talking to you, like he's saying, I don't want to talk to you, I'm talking to my cat. Like maybe he's in whatever
He's just chilling in the
afterlife
room.
with his cat.
Yeah.
Like, and they've both chosen to stay there together. That's kind of cute if you think about it.
And then we're just there, like, bothering them. And so every
Right.
time we say, okay, we're going to end this, they're like, finally.
Right. They're like, thank you. If there's anything else you want to say. And no one ever wanted to say anything else.
Nope. We said that several times.
So overall, though, I think this day was really great. We didn't feel anything scary. We didn't feel threatened. It was a great place to stay. It was quiet. That little town was so quiet. It was really nice, actually, to stay there, and I really loved it. I even think my husband and I should go back and stay there because it was just so cute and romantic. So,
And just don't tell him that it's haunted.
no, he'll be fine. Maybe. So while we were investigating at the Temperance House, we, as we said, used several pieces of equipment, including our EVP or our voice recorder. And Laura and I have had the opportunity now to review that evidence. And what do you think, Laura?
I'm on the fence about things that I heard. I went through the audio and did some enhancement, just mostly making the volume louder at certain parts where I felt I heard something in the background. And hopefully, everybody can go on our website and listen to these for themselves and make their own conclusions. My conclusion is that maybe I'm putting too much into it based on the stories we know.
It's always hard when you know the history to then not extrapolate and be like, that's definitely what it is. Right.
Right.
What's that thing called when your mind sees a blob on a picture and then wants to make it into a real picture? And so it says, oh, that's a rocking chair, that's a face, or that's a something when there's actually really nothing there. I feel like that's what we're doing sometimes as paranormal investigators, have heard the stories and believe there's certain spirits or ghosts in a certain place. And so we're making ourselves believe that that's what's there. If we went in with no information, we might come to a different conclusion.
It's called pareidolia. I just looked it up to remind ourselves.
Great,
So-
because I would have never pulled that.
Pareidolia is the tendency of the human mind to perceive familiar patterns, such as faces or objects, in random stimuli. I wouldn't call these random per se.
So they're not exactly random, but your mind, the first thing it goes to is that thing that we already know. And it could very much be that, but it could also be like, oh, our mind took us there because that's what we believe it to be.
Right.
But
So
after listening,
yeah, in the case of these pieces of potential evidence, we heard something that sounded like whispering a couple different times, and it sounded markedly different than the people we were hearing downstairs in other parts of the hotel. The whispering sounded, if it was whispering, closer to us, as if we ourselves were whispering and didn't remember that we had whispered something. But I know for certain it was not us.
No, but when you listen to the recording and we're maybe talking softly or semi-whispering, but to each other, right? You can hear it. You can hear that it's me or hear that it's you softly talking. And these were much like,
right. It's as if we knew parcel tongue.
Yes, that's what it sounded like. Exactly. Underneath our talking.
We couldn't make out I don't think any actual words or verbiage. And then there was another instance when it sounds like a purring potentially. And we talked about how like there could be a cat haunting this place.
Right. It wasn't even one of the main stories. And then we've talked about where you felt the cold pocket underneath your legs and in the
Right.
chair, which was interesting. And then after reviewing the EVP and hearing what sounds like cat noises, it just kind of, I don't know, puts it all together, right? But then maybe we're just extrapolating.
There's potential that there could be a cat spirit of some kind there. And it's maybe why when we were asking certain questions that we weren't getting responses because a cat can't make human responses. But then we did get the cat ball to go off a couple times and couldn't quite explain why. We appropriated that to, oh, the floorboards are uneven. Maybe it got bumped or rolled a little bit or a floorboard bent, or we were next to the bed, maybe we brushed the bedspread and it went off. We were trying to attribute our own actions or different ways to debunk these things, when in actuality it could have been a legitimate ghost cat playing with the cat balls that we had brought.
I mean, right. We were trying to debunk it when maybe we shouldn't be trying so hard to debunk it because maybe there was actually something there. Who knows? I would encourage everyone to go the detail page of this episode and download the recording snippets that we have and tell us on Facebook or in the comments what you think, or if it's nothing. We'd really like some other feedback because we have no idea.
We'll have our belief of what it could be notated next to each one.
So, Laura, now that we've been there, your boo scale rating was 2. What is your boo scale?
I think it would stay a 2, maybe even drop to a 1, because our boo scale is based on a scariness factor, and I felt really comfortable there, aside from the pillows. But I think that's also the hominess of it, and the fact that the people there, the stories that they have about the hauntings, feel very welcoming and familiar. Like if this spirit really is playing tricks on Nick at the bar, that's funny. It's not like a spirit who's upset or doesn't want you there. And honestly, even if they were annoyed by us being there and excited when we were about to stop doing what we were doing, that still doesn't make me raise my boo scale rating.
Well, they didn't try to scare us or make us feel uncomfortable if there was something in fact there. They were just fine with us being there.
Yeah.
So I agree. I feel like I would probably drop to a 1 as well, just because I do think it is haunted. I'm not sure about our evidence we collected that night, but given the history that was there, the reported hauntings from staff, people we talked to in reports and news articles that I shared earlier, I do feel like there's something there. But like you said, I don't think it's menacing. I think it's there to just be there.
It was a great way to finish out the weekend and just remember that the ghosts and the spirits that we see, in these shows that people talk about, that people go and investigate, at the core of it, they were just people, and they are still just people like you and I. Whether you think they may be on a different plane or it's a residual haunting and they used to be there, whatever the case may be, they're still just like you and I at the end of the day.
That wraps these mini episodes. They were so fun to produce for you all. And again, thank you for joining us. I know it's not our usual format, but it was fun to share Paracon with you, our Penhurst experience, being at the asylum, going to the Temperance House. I hope you enjoyed the history. I hope you enjoyed the hauntings. I hope you go to our website and check out the evidence we caught and see what you think for yourself. We'd love to know your feedback.
And if you liked these mini episodes and you liked us doing this investigation at the Temperance House and you want to see us do this kind of thing more, the best way that you can support us is by going to our support page and donating, so that we can use some of that funding to go to different haunted locations and investigate.
Right. So, as always, thanks for listening and happy haunting.